Hey, Larken Rose here, and an interesting topic came up in comments under some post or other somewhere. I already forget where. And that is the question of to what extent can somebody claim mere ignorance? And so they're not to blame for what's going on because they didn't know. They voted for somebody, some party, some plan, some agenda, whatever. And then the real world results of that include innocent people suffering completely unfairly. And a lot of people say, well, that's not what I wanted, and I didn't know that was going on. And that's true for a lot of people. I would say most people, their political agendas and what they advocate, they have, at least to begin with, they have good intentions. They don't want innocent people suffering. That's not their goal. That's only sociopaths would have that as their actual goal. And yet, when they're shown real world results of what's actually happening, what's actually being done by the people they voted into power or the agendas or the legislation that they supported, a lot of people either deny it, that's not really happening, or they downplay it. Well, maybe that happens every once in a while, but this is really serious and necessary anyway. Or they all the way make excuses for it, and this is the ugliest version. They start basically cheering for it. Well, good. Like, yeah, some innocent people were victimized, but maybe they weren't so innocent. Maybe they deserved it. So the question is, how bad does something have to be before the people who cheered for it can no longer claim ignorance as an excuse? Can no longer just say, well, I meant well. Okay, to begin with, that's fine. And I'll use the example of communism. A lot of people who don't understand economics, they don't understand what communism is really based on. They think it's about caring and sharing, and no, it isn't. It's about envy and violence. But if they start with good intentions and, well, I just want everybody taken care of, okay, you can be misguided and ignorant and have good intentions. Then if it's implemented and bad things start happening, as they have many, many times with socialism and communism, all the way up to literally the worst atrocities in the history of mankind, done by socialist and or communist regimes, at what point do you no longer deserve the luxury of saying, well, I meant well? Like, you can't blame me for the actual real world outcome, for the real people suffering and dying as a result of the crappy ideas that I believed in, because I wanted the good version. They didn't do it right. How far does that excuse extend? Now, it's not just the left I'm talking about, and right now we have lots of examples of ridiculous denial of due process and a whole bunch of authoritarian crap going on under Trump and that whole creepy bootlicking agenda. And there are people who can say, well, I just want like scary murderers and rapists out of the country. Okay, that's a good motive. I mean, not sure why it's any better to just put them in a different country. There's still victims over there. How about you do something so they can't hurt anybody? But aside from that, not wanting scary, horrible people in your neighborhood, yeah, that's a good motive. I'm all in favor of that. But when a story comes out that, whoops, somebody who wasn't really a member of that gang and there was no trial and they weren't convicted of anything and there was no due process and there was no proof of anything, they're one of the ones who got scooped up and literally shipped off to a slave camp in El Salvador. When that happens, a lot of Trumpites will do the thing of pretend it didn't happen. No, he was bad. Like, first of all, how would you know? Second of all, even if that guy really was bad and that particular story, if you're not giving people due process, obviously that's a potential. Well, I want these scary people shipped away without due process. Okay, how do you know that it's just the scary people if you're not giving them due process? You don't. And of course, there's a possibility that innocent people are going to get dragged away too. That's why the due process clause exists, Fifth Amendment, that nobody should be deprived. No person, they're people too, has nothing to do with citizenship. No person should be deprived life, liberty, or property, however it's phrased, without due process of law. You can't just have government say, well, we think he's bad, so we're going to do these things to him. Did you prove anything? Do you have evidence? Did you have a trial? Did you give him any chance to say, wait a minute, no, I'm an American citizen. That's somebody else by that name was... Or did you say, no, government says they're bad, so we don't really care? Well, whether or not a particular story was an example of the horrible outcome that can happen, obviously there's the potential of that happening. So when it happens, and the people who cheered for that policy react, how much of an excuse do they deserve? How much can they plead ignorance? Well, that's not what I wanted to have happen. Well, that's what happened as a direct result of what you advocated. Are you going to stop advocating that? Or are you going to make excuses? Well, we really needed to, because if you don't show concern, even if it's one innocent victim, if you try to just sort of ignore it or look it away or brush it under the rug or dismiss it or even make excuses for it, well, then he shouldn't have been, whatever. At what point are you not a good person anymore? You can't claim ignorance anymore. You can't pretend that, well, I had good intentions. Okay, maybe you did at the beginning, but if you see the real world outcome and you see that it is not good and bad things are happening to good people, can you still pretend to be ignorant? Now, there's lots of examples of this in history. Of course, a very famous one that people talk about. I often use the example of Hitler and the Third Reich because that's what lots of Americans know about, even though it's, at most, the third worst atrocity as far as body counts, way behind both Mao and Stalin. But it's the one people know about. It's the one Americans know about. If I say Mao, most Americans are like, what? So I use it because it's the example they know, but could use the other examples just as easily. But there's been plenty of talk about, well, did the German people know what was going on? But the question is worse than that. How much did they try to not acknowledge what was going on? Because you can see that. You can see that with the left. You can see it with the right. You can see it with everybody who believes in government. When the policies they advocate start stomping on decent people, do they care? If the left is saying, everybody, you have to shut down, you have to wear masks, you have to get injected with this thing that they don't know anything about and the people injecting it don't know anything about. Like, you don't know it's necessary. You don't know it's actually even helpful. You don't know whether it's dangerous. But you, from your good intentions, hopefully, you think this is important. This will save everybody. When you find out, oh, it didn't, and it endangered people, and it killed children who didn't at all need it. They were at zero risk of dying from the actual disease, but they died from the thing you pushed on them. You wanted pushed on people. Now, when that comes out, if you go quiet and don't say anything, you really going to pretend you're a good person? You cheered for something that destroyed millions of people's lives and killed a bunch of people. Did you come out as loud as you were before and say, I'm sorry, that was wrong. I didn't know. I thought it was something good. I was in favor of it and pushing it because I thought it was good. I thought it was important. And now I see that what I supported inflicted horrible harm and on financial harm, physical harm, all sorts of harm on lots and lots of people. I shouldn't have supported that. Or do you just quietly hope people are going to forget what you did? Just like the right does. Just like the supporters of Hitler did. Just like the supporters of Mao did. Just like the supporters of Stalin did. Just like the supporters of every single authoritarian government, every flavor of authority you can imagine. When the reality, the real world consequences of what they condone starts to hit and they start to realize it. So my guess would be, in the case of Hitler, lots of Germans might have suspected something. A bunch of them probably didn't. They probably just thought he's saving our country because all these unfair things and rah-rah-rah for nationalism. And then if they start to hear rumors of, like, there's some really bad stuff going on. People are being harassed and robbed and shot and thrown in ditches. Like, there's bad stuff going on. I expect a whole lot of Germans did exactly what I've seen a whole lot of Democrats do and a whole lot of Republicans do, which is care more about their own reputation and how they look than the real world results of what they advocated. So are they not to blame? Can they still claim ignorance when they've seen the real world results of what they've been cheering for? And it's a hard question. I don't have a magic line where I say, well, right here, suddenly, before that, yeah, you had good intentions and you're not a horrible person. But right after that, you're a horrible person. I can't really give a clear definition of that. And I've seen a lot of people make excuses. I am one of the people who made excuses. And now I very much and very loudly condemn the statist BS I supported before. Back when I had no clue about reality, I supported the troops because I thought they were actually like defending us from bad people and spreading freedom and democracy. Yeah, it was a very long time ago. And I was very clueless. And now I pointed out, like I am right now, that I was unwittingly an advocate of evil. I was a big supporter of law enforcement because back then I imagined that what they actually did was protect the good guys from stopping the bad guys. And every once in a blue moon that might happen, and the rest of the time they are the bad guys. They're the biggest thief around. They're the biggest thug around. They commit more extortion and assault than all the other gangs combined. I didn't know that back then, so my good intentions were corrupted by way of statism into cheering for stuff that was actually destructive. Unbeknownst to me, that's not what I was trying to support. But at some point, I had to look at it and go, okay, this isn't good. I'm not gonna pretend I don't see this and don't know it's there. If you find out the U.S. military is doing some heinous stuff, if I was a supporter of the military and they're doing that, I'm not such a horrible person that I'm just going to go, no, I'm going to either make excuses or not mention it or pretend it's not happening. No, I supported it because I want the innocent protected. If the thing I supported isn't doing that, what kind of cowardly scumbag am I if I know that the thing I helped cheer for is victimizing innocents and I don't say anything and I don't do anything and I keep supporting it? Well, that's most Americans when it comes to the U.S. military. Most Americans make excuses. Well, sure, a video came out of them just gunning down a bunch of unarmed reporters, some random place who were strolling around the street. Oh, sure, they did this horrible thing. Sure, they tortured a bunch of people. Sure, they did that. But I mean, this is war or whatever excuse you want to throw out. And so this question I don't have a clear answer for. How long can somebody claim ignorance to the real world results of the authoritarian crap that they support? And it's easy to condemn the other side when they do it. The other side. It's easy for Republicans to point out Democrats and say, look at all these lives. Is torturing children with these stupid masks that don't do anything. All these lives of people that were ruined because you forced them to shut down your business when that didn't do any good. Where's your apologies? Where's you loudly admitting you were wrong? Yeah, I agree. They should do that. And most of them never will because they're unprincipled cowards. And so are the Republicans condemning them, who right now are looking the other way or making excuses for the nasty violence being done to nonviolent people in the name of immigration crap and the war on drugs and the military actions, blowing up a bunch of civilians in Yemen. Without a declaration of war, by the way, for those who care about that. Do you respond to that the same way you respond to Democrats having supported evil? Or when your side does it, do you make excuses or drag your feet or not really pay attention or not talk about it too much? Maybe somewhere you'll say, yeah, that was bad. I wish that didn't happen. But, so certain evils you'll sort of quickly condemn, and so you can get it over with and then get back to cheering for the monstrosity that did that. Because the other side, they're the bad guys. You're the bad guys too. If you turn a blind eye to that, especially when it comes from things that you advocated, you're the bad guy too. At some point, you can argue about where the line is. You can argue about culpability, and you can argue about whether somebody's ignorant or being willfully ignorant, where they're trying to not know the truth so they can cling to a belief system that's actually destructive. Wherever you would draw the line, wherever I would draw the line, humanity kind of needs you to have more of a spine and more of a conscience than all the people who will cheer for something and then find out that really bad things happened as a result. And who won't then go, wait, I didn't want that. Let me be first to condemn that bad thing. That is not what I wanted. That should not be happening. And a fine example of that is police abuse. I support the men and women in blue. What do you do when a video comes out of the men and women in blue just beating the crap out of some handcuffed, unarmed person? Well, I didn't know the whole story. Okay, you're an unprincipled piece of crap, and your claims of wanting to protect the innocent are out the window. No, you just support that street gang no matter what they do. Because even back when I was a statist, if there was an example of police abuse that was just obvious and undeniable, I would say that's really bad. And if the good cops should go after anybody quickly, loudly, and severely, it's that cop who just did that. Because if they don't, it demonstrates they don't give a crap about the innocent. They just care about their gang and power. But this is the nature of statism, and it's the nature of politics, that when you choose a side, you're less and less likely to be able to say, hey, that guy who I thought was on my side, he's an evil piece of crap. And I'm going to say so loudly, and I'm going to condemn him loudly. I'm not going to let evil slide or downplay it or ignore it or make excuses for it just because it's a result of the party I cheered for, or the agenda I cheered for, or the legislation I cheered for. So I don't have a clear answer to the question, but I'm going to have you end this with a question for you. Do you think you have been consistent and principled and intentionally observant and responsible when it comes to the nasty results of things you've voted for, candidates you voted for, laws you supported? Or do you kind of look the other way on purpose? Because if you kind of look the other way on purpose, or you make excuses for it, read a history book and then you'll understand why so many bad things have happened in history. Because lots of other people were just like you.